Here are the main developments this Saturday morning. Mercy flights for Australians still stuck overseas after the government strikes a deal with Qantas and Virgin to bring them home. Australia enters a suppression phase in the pandemic, with the Prime Minister urging us to stay home over Easter. Coles and Woolworths announced new restrictions limiting the number of shoppers allowed in supermarkets.
An explosive email reveals health authorities were warned about sick passengers on board the Ruby Princess cruise ship. Melbourne researchers make a breakthrough in trying to find a cure for COVID-19. Britain records its deadliest day in the pandemic yet, 684 deaths. And the Queen to make a rare televised address about the coronavirus crisis.
We have special coverage this morning with our team of reporters. First to Taylor Aiken in Canberra. Taylor, a deal has been struck to bring home stranded Aussies.
Good morning, Ange. That's right. The federal government agreeing to subsidise 4 international routes to bring those Australians still stranded overseas home. The airlines Qantas and Virgin will restart flights to Los Angeles, Hong Kong, London and Auckland, with the federal government agreeing to underwrite any losses for the airlines in flying empty planes to the 4 destinations. Critical medical supplies and other freight will also be ferried back on the flights. The plan comes as the Prime Minister announced Australia is now in the suppression phase of containing this virus, but warned that we as a nation must not be complacent.
The changes that you are making, Australia, are working. Right now, that trajectory is promising. It's encouraging. Patience must become the virtue of Australians.
Scott Morrison also warned that Australians should not be planning a holiday or going to see relatives during this upcoming Easter break, saying that practicing social distancing will be critical over these next few weeks to ensure we don't have another surge in coronavirus cases. Guys.
Paul Dowsley is in Melbourne for us. Paul, changes to the way we shop. Supermarket giants Coles and Woolworths will now limit the number of customers in their stores.
Matt, they will install staff and security guards at the front of stores over coming days to stop you going inside if there are too many people already shopping inside. Neither has said just how many is too many, but clearly supermarkets now remain one of those places where people are still getting reasonably close to each other in groups in a confined space. So this will come into effect over the next few days. There will also be stickers on the floor at checkouts to stop you getting too close to other customers. Coles has recommended that you turn up with a shopping list so that when you get inside you do it all very quickly, and we'll hear from the Chief of Coles shortly. We've also learned overnight that Qantas and Jetstar, they have 50 staff who have tested positive. I actually know one of the flight attendants who tested positive. He told me that he didn't have any symptoms really, except for a bit of a heartburn feeling, and that he was only tested because of his job, and otherwise he would have gone about his normal day once the airline shut down and been out in the community potentially infecting people unknowingly. That's how tricky this virus is to spread. It's also affecting in Victoria the health workers. Of the 1,085 in Victoria who have tested positive, it's thought that about 150 are healthcare workers, and at the Alfred Hospital they have sent about 100 staff home, told them to self-isolate because of a cluster that is broken out there. Finally though, some good news from Victoria. At Melbourne University, scientists and researchers have been using the head lice treatment ivermectin to see what happens when it is mixed in a petri dish with COVID-19. Remarkably, in 24 hours, they report that it starts to kill cells that cause the virus within 48 hours. It prevents the replication of the virus in those cells. There are human trials that could start as soon as next month, but there's been a message to not rush and buy this treatment, and certainly not to consume it. Matt and Ange, but some good news there.
Yes, very promising. Serena Andaloro is in Sydney. Serena, health authorities were warned about sick passengers on board the Ruby Princess.
Good morning, Ange. And police are determined to get to the bottom of who is to blame. But these emails back up what the Australian Border Force has previously said, that New South Wales Health allowed these passengers to get off untested, despite being explicitly told by a doctor on board the ship that there were passengers with respiratory infections. Now, the Ruby Princess is one of 6 cruise ships parked off our coast. We're told all of them will be gone by tomorrow night, but of its 1,000 crew members still on board, we're told hundreds are sick and awaiting coronavirus test results. Now, what that means, Police Commissioner Mick Fuller has said that anyone who needs to get off for health reasons will get off. We have an obligation under international law to help them.
Well, Jeff Parry is in Perth, and Jeff, a renewed standoff is brewing between the WA government and a cruise ship off the coast there.
That's right, morning guys. The Artania has been a headache now for the state government for more than a week. It wants the ship to sail. The ship's master says it's not going anywhere at the moment. The total number of infections for passengers and crew from that ship now reaching 50. And we saw yesterday a German passenger, 60-year-old man, died in Joondalup Hospital. He becomes the state's 3rd death. He came off the Artania several days ago, and they are still finding that crew on that ship are still exhibiting signs of coronavirus. The master wants to offload most of the crew who live in the Philippines and Indonesia. Negotiations are going on with Border Force to see whether that can be achieved. And at 11:59 tonight, those hard borders come into force in Western Australia. Police and Army patrolling the borders to stop eastern staters coming in. They will not be allowed onto flights to fly into Western Australia. They will not be able to drive over the border. There are some exemptions, some FIFO workers, some critical workers from the mining industry, law enforcement, and those sorts of people will be able to travel across, but others will not. As I said, at 11:59, Western Australia becomes that island within an island, guys.
OK, US correspondent Paul Kadak is in New York. Paul, the death toll continues to rise there.
Good morning, Ange. Yeah, that's right. And it is rising at such a rate that there is real concern that Americans aren't doing enough to follow social distancing and stay-at-home guidelines. The number of cases of COVID-19 in the US now more than 260,000, and the death toll is now approaching 7,000. And sadly, America has reached a grim milestone, having 1,000 deaths in just one day. In the last 24 hours, 1,000 Americans have died from COVID-19. That's about 1 every 90 seconds. More than half of those deaths have been here in New York State, still very much the epicenter of the outbreak. And the state's governor has said that they could reach the apex of cases in the next 7 days, but there's only enough ventilators, the life-saving ventilators, to last 6 days. So they're calling for more equipment, more staff to try and get through the peak of this outbreak, which could be coming in as soon as a week. Now, there's better news for some Australians who've been trapped on cruise ships down off the south of the United States, on board the Zaandam and the Rotterdam. 130 Australians on board those ships that have been looking for a port for 18 days. Yesterday we saw them finally get permission to come into port in Florida. Now the arrangements were that those foreign nationals on board those ships would be taken to chartered flights, and that's been happening this morning. That is the good news for those Australians on board. Sanitised buses running those passengers from the ship straight to the airport, straight to a part of the tarmac to be kept separate from people, to be put onto charter flights. So hopefully for those Australians, they are now on their way home. And given the success of those ships coming into Florida, getting permission, another cruise ship, the Coral Princess, currently in the Caribbean, which has also been looking for somewhere to dock, will get that permission in a couple of days. It is on its way now with 80 Australians on board.
An unbelievable crisis unfolding there in New York. Stay safe, Paul. Thank you to our team of reporters. In the UK, another 684 fatalities have been recorded in the deadliest day yet. This takes the overall death toll to 3,600.
It comes as Prime Minister Boris Johnson says he's still in isolation with a temperature after testing positive last week. Buckingham Palace says the Queen will give a rare address to the Commonwealth on the coronavirus crisis on Monday.
Obviously designed to try and reassure people there, but that number, I mean, if we said that several weeks ago, 684 people in a single day, it defies belief.
Yep, the whole country in lockdown. It's terrifying.